Could you tell me a little bit about yourself and your upbringing?
Well, I am an autistic adult. I've been knowing that I am autistic, or what it used to be called Asperger's, since 2005 or 2006. I'm not exactly sure about the year, but I didn't really get into doing more research. I did very limited research at the time, and then about maybe 8 years ago or something, I started watching this YouTube channel called Invisible Eye, and she was one of the first girls that used to start doing autism in females, videos. I started watching her because I wanted to do a YouTube since that time, and I just kind of wanted to see what was out there. And I started seeing her, and I'm like, oh my god! Like, if the first video I saw was a boy, so when I saw a girl's perspectives and stories and all her personal experiences, kind of felt even more. I felt like I could relate even more. I'm like, oh wow, like yes, that's so me, and yes, you like to feel like somebody else gets you and stuff. I feel like that was a really good feeling. That's has been one of what's been pushing me to, like, I have to do this YouTube channel. I was like pushed it for a long time. But I grew up in Mexico. I grew up in a beautiful small little beach city in La Baja called La Paz, and my parents are from there. Well, my mom is from here, but she also grew up there too. And when there was a crisis started getting, hitting, there was some changes and stuff, and the just kind of like crisis got hitting or whatever in Mexico. And that time, 2004, we moved here. I was like a couple months away from being 18. So my transition over here was really, really hard. I'm going to be talking about all the details on my channel because it's a long, long story. But it was really tough. It was really tough moving over here because I was supposed to do my last semester, or my last, because they thought, well, they can, put you back a 6 months. And so my last year, or at least 2 years of high school, I wanted to finish them here. That's why they brought me. That's why they didn't let me finish high school there, because they could have left me over there with my grandma. They could have let me and helped me, I would have much rather finished my high school over there. But I was already dealing with depression. Like, depression had already started. I started dealing with it when I was 16. So it was an incredibly tough journey for me to leave everything that I knew and start all over again. Although it was always in my plans to come to the U.S. and study film. That idea I always had since I was like a little girl, like 6 years old or something. I just got it in my head, like, I want to make movies. I want to be a movie director. People thought I was crazy, but I was like, yeah, she'll grow out of it. I didn't. So that's what I always wanted to do. And I was like, so where do they teach that? Well, I have an uncle, actually. He's a famous director. But so I was like, well, I'm going to, go where my uncle lives, and just gonna, look for a school there. They have to teach it somewhere over there. Like, I thought, like, there was no Google at the time, so I just imagined there has to be a school where they teach a film because it's Hollywood. So I'm gonna go to Hollywood, and yeah, that was my goal. But I got sidetracked from it for many years because of depression. Depression led me to drugs and a bunch of stuff. So transitioning in the middle of, I had already started with depression. I already started experimenting with drugs, but it wasn't nothing serious. It was more like a rebellious thing. It was just a rebellious kind of like, phase that I was going through. I was like, I want to be a bad girl. I wanted to, not care about, rules or anything, or my parents said. Like, I wanted to do the complete opposite from whatever my parents would tell me. Especially, it was a rebellion against my dad. And so I started like that. And I started kind of like, so I was a late bloomer, of course. All my friends started acting like teenagers at 14 and stuff like that. I started acting like a teenager at 16, kind of. But I started kind of want to get curious about, like, okay, let's see why, let's see what parties are all about. And let's see. But it was more like, because I would have, honestly, if my parents would have been like super like, not hard on me, and then would have just kind of like give me everything I wanted and stuff like that, I would have probably never wanted to go against them. Like, it would have always been in good terms, that I would have probably been like, oh yeah, I don't need to smoke, I don't need to drink, I don't need parties, you know. I get sleepy on them anyway. So, you know, I was never like that. I was very cringy when I was little. I love watching cartoons and just being at home and eating, and that's all I like to do. So, but then when just kind of like things changed, went a different path, and that's how I started getting into kind of like all the teenager things, and you know, oh, now I want to have a boyfriend, and now I want to, you know, now I want to smoke, you know, and stuff like that. And now I drink, and I think I got, like, I drank once, and I swear now I drink, but it was just kind of like, if I was there, I would drink, but it wasn't something that I liked doing. I just wanted to do it for the sake of, like, I'm a rebel. Like, that was my mission. And then we moved to the U.S. So my dad's business went down. So I think that's what kind of like made my depression a little bit bigger, because my dad was so stressed that he would just, you know, put all his stress on me, and that just kind of like made my life a lot harder, and make all the confusions that one goes through when you're a teenager, just kind of made it very just intense, and nothing made sense. So I wanted to move. When we decided, Mom said, like, you know what, let's try kind of like moving, start fresh, you know, just change of air, different life in the U.S. I have a friend over there, and she said she'll like help us out if we have any trouble and stuff. And so my parents sold the two houses that they had there and everything, and we moved. It sounded like a really good idea, but my mom had to come here first and get a job and everything. So my dad was just very difficult, you know, the time that he was over there. So when we finally moved over here, a bunch of stuff happened. In between. Finally, I moved over here, and when we moved here, we moved to this neighborhood where, like, nobody wanted to rent to my mom because she didn't have credit. So she could only rent in certain areas, and those areas in the valley were like I don't know if the worst, because actually the place didn't look bad at sight, but I think like most areas in the valley are bad. So yeah, it was just one of those areas where like there was a bunch of like really bad people living in that area. And so it was really hard. I got jumped by 6 girls just within the first couple of weeks or 3 weeks or something. Like, yeah, like one of the girls didn't like the way I looked at them, and her and her friends like literally beat me up, like literally hit me, kicked me, everything. It was just kind of like very, very intense for me, because I never thought I would go through something like that. You know, I came from this really, you know, small city where everybody was so nice to each other. There was no crime where I come from. Everyone was so like, you know, actually the more humble you were, the nicer you were in my city. So it was really weird to me to be like, oh, my own, you know, these Mexican girls, literally, or Hispanic or whatever they were, but I think they're Mexican. You know, they just jumped me and started beating me. I'm like, wow, that's not what I'm used to in Mexico. That's seems like we're different, you know. Feel like we're coming from different countries, because I guess, you know, Hispanic people here are not very nice. I thought that was my idea off the bat. And then the other sad thing that happened to me was that I tried to join high school, and then they had this really weird rule that if you were about to be 18, you couldn't start high school. So that just kind of like, yeah, it was a horror deal. It was really hard for me to be able to join high school. I went through all these, like, it was the information, the system was terrible. There was no guiding, nothing. Wasted 2 years of my life just finding a way. So how could I get my high school diploma? It was so ridiculous. Finally, I found out by luck through a friend that I could start going to community college just for being 18 years old. And I'm like, that makes no sense. But I'm like, that makes no sense. And not being able to finish high school also doesn't make sense. Like, what the hell? But okay. So yeah, that's how I, you know, started. But that's how it's been, you know, a big chunk of my life that marked me a lot. And it was a big, you know, cut in the middle of my life. And then me finding out about ADHD, about autism and stuff. I mean, well, Asperger's at that time, and then having really strict parents along the way. So my upbringing, I guess, my answer to that, my upbringing was pretty good when I was little. Like I had a really nice life. My parents, they started from the bottom actually. They got married young and then they were in school, but they kind of like dropped out. Well, my dad almost finished pretty much. He pretty much finished. I think he just didn't get there's a different process in Mexico to finish, to get your title. But my dad did finish. My mom didn't. She dropped out. So they kind of started from the bottom and they built a business and they picked up pretty fast. They did good. So I was always in private school. I was always, they took me to Disneyland every year up until I was like 7 or 8. And everything was good. My mom took me to parties, like the whole like very common average thing, except that, and I always have friends, like friends in I made more friends in my community than in school, because school's more like, even as little kids, there's still little politics and like, oh, don't talk to this person. But I never felt like I had trouble making friends. Like I never felt like that. But I did feel, it's a very long story. It's just very different. I will get in trouble for the most weird things, and kids will make me sometimes like get in trouble, like, hey, do this, da da da, and I will go ahead and do it because it will tell me. So I was very naive, and they could trick me into doing things like that. So it was just, I always felt different, and I always noticed that my treatment was different. But you know what? Kids are a lot less. They can be very mean to a certain extent, but adults are worse. As I can say, teenagers and adults are a lot worse. So the worst case scenarios as a kid does not compare all the horrible things I went through as a teenager, as an adult. It was a lot worse. So if anything, my childhood, I remember nothing but good things. If I had any bad experiences, I think most likely I blocked them for the most part. And other than that, I think I do remember one thing that I remember when I was little was that I wanted to run away from home. That one thing I do remember writing in my diary. I just think that I just never liked the way my dad was. Never liked the way, like I like the idea of having a family whole, but many times I just didn't feel like my parents could understand me. I didn't feel like my parents were good parents. They still sort of are good parents, but to me, they were not. So I always wanted to run away from home, and I just kind of like never felt completely like understood by my parents. But now that I look things into perspective and stuff, I think, it would have been ideal to have like a little less strict parents or whatever, but one can get used to a situation. It wasn't like horrible. There's just kids that literally get, tortured and beaten, and, nothing good ever comes for them, from their parents. Like I had a really good kid, except that, a really good life, everything I wanted, I had clothing, food. I would have like, weekends with, whatever. If I want to go to the movies, whatever I want to do, I will do. But I just kind of felt that my dad's idea of like punishment was a little too overboard, and that kind of like, it affected me because my dad didn't know how to talk to me and explain why I was in trouble. And that's one of the biggest issues. I just always felt like I was in trouble and I never knew why. So that's one thing I'm never going to do to my children. I always want to make sure when I punish them, because definitely reprimanding your kids is important. I know parents that never freaking reprimand their kids, and I feel like that's just not a good lesson to teach them, because in life, when you do wrong things, maybe to you it's not that big of a deal, but it's important to understand that how your actions can hurt other people. So anything that you do wrong, there's going to be consequences. Obviously, if you break the law or something, or do something really bad, like there's going to be consequences. So you need to teach that to your kids at a young age, so they have the conscience of that, so they don't have to go ahead and experience it as adults, or go as jerks and be like, oh, mom is going to bail me out of this, or, you know, which a lot of people do with their kids. Yeah, it's a clash. It's a clash for me because I come from that world where like everything costs so much, and I was brought up that way. So now everything that I earn, I appreciate, I worship it, you know. But a lot of people don't, and there's too many clashes of cultures here. Too many clashes, and in Mexico wasn't like that. It was like everyone was Mexican. Everyone was the same. You know, there was rich and poor and middle class, but there was no real difference in mentality. And we could see that you guys are like different. There was, you could see some Asian people there, but Asian people, they will still hang around other Mexicans. They wouldn't just hang around with themselves and act differently. Maybe their parents were, but you understood, like, it's like, oh, you know, well, they're from there, they're different. But once their kids that they were brought up there, they acted like everyone else. They got along with everyone else. There was no Asian secluded group, and there was no seclusion on like races and cultures. Like, you come to this culture, you become part of this culture. And that's what I was used to my entire life. So coming here and having to kind of like, I don't belong to the Mexican culture from here because it's so different. And so I feel like I've always been looking for my community, right? So I guess find out about, part of me was kind of thinking, well, maybe because I'm Asperger's, I thought that's why I'm different. So I seek that community, and I'm like, I want to start my YouTube channel, and I started getting more into the community. Once I started it, I got excited, but then I came to learn that even the autistic community is very, very divided with different beliefs. Some people believing it needs to be cured. Some other people believing it's a disability and that everyone should see it that way. And then some other people believing that no, it's not disability. It's actually you have other abilities that a lot of neurotypicals can do, and this kind of like the what's called the geek syndrome or something. There's like a lot. There's that side of things, like, hey, we actually have all these abilities and we can do all these things. So there's a lot of engineers that are like really good because they're autistic or because they're Asperger's. But then you have the contrary to that group thinking, oh, no, those people right there, they think they're better than the rest on the spectrum. So just kind of like, why do you gotta see it like that? It just kind of feels weird because, like, I go into social media and I never know who am I going to come across. And you think like, hey, oh, you're neurodivergent, or you have a neurodivergent page, or your autistic page. Oh, me too, like, we're the same, and I just sound like, no, we're not. We're not even the same at all. Like you hate people like me. So it's just really hard, really hard to be like, you never know. You never know who you're going to, who are you going to run into in these. So stressful. I just wish that people just be less complicated and just accept each other for whatever they are, for whatever it is. Life is so short. Life is so short. This world, I don't even know if it's going to be, it's going to survive another 30 years, to be honest. We're over here fighting for, stupid things. When it's like, let's start with the little things. How about let's start with not criticizing each other, treating each other like, like you would like others to treat you, right? Might not always work, but it's a good way. It's a good guide to be like, hey, treat others just fairly, and that's it. Like, don't. I think most of us don't expect special treatment. Some people do, but most of us don't really expect special treatment. But also don't expect like to be treated like less than. So there's those people that say like, oh yeah, like they claim like they fight for the rights of whatever they think they're fighting, but then they're attacking somebody else so like you're by you being critical and attacking a different group, you're acting the same. You're doing the same thing.
How well do you feel that your family understands you and you, your family, and also what role have they played in your life in regard to autism?
It's complex, you know. My parents, obviously, I feel like they understood me, obviously, a lot. Like a parent knows his kids, but they're also humans. So a lot of times, you know, if I was in school, or they would get like, I feel like many times they would listen to other, because they were so young, they would listen to other people more than they listened to me. And that was something that I think it was, I don't know if other people are going to relate to this in different ways, because in part could be that, some people who are, well, like stubborn parents or closed-minded parents could probably be on the same boat. But I feel like in part was because I came from a time where transitioning to new ways was barely happening, like new ways of parenting. And especially in such a small city in Mexico, my parents were raised very old school. So they still had like that new, like they were kind of like that new generation of like, yeah, we're like cool parents, but not that cool, you know? And so they were young, and they, like, my parents still like partying when I was little, but then when it came to being parents to me, they, like when it came to reprimanding me, that they still took a lot of old school measures. Um, I don't think, honestly, think they knew what they were doing. I don't think they knew what they were doing. They just kind of like followed what they were taught when they were little, and to them it kind of seemed to work, but it didn't work for me. I think a big part is because there's two theories, right? My mom thinks like, well, if we would have known that you had autism, that you were autistic, or you were asked, or even just like what was the understanding of Asperger's in that time, we would have probably been a lot more lenient with you, and we would have probably never been strict with you, and that would have probably never, we were probably kind of like giving you the idea that, like they think that it's like the fact that we're strict on you, that's what made you kind of like how turn into a stronger person. That's what they think. But you know what? Knowing my parents, I really don't think, even if they would have known what Asperger's, I really think that they would have still been like hard, because that's just their nature. Like I feel like they would have still been like that. So definitely, I feel like awareness, knowledge about something really changes a lot, because I feel like maybe that would have made the difference between them not crossing the lines. Many times they just thought that I was a kid that would, that would do things on purpose. And that it's like, Mom, I told you this, that, for example, I used to drop the drink and when we were eating every day. That's part of what is called dyspraxia. So if my parents would have known in that time what it was, I feel like they would have still been hard on me, because they would have been like, well, I do see that you are smart enough to understand. Like me with my dog, people might be able to argue, oh, he's just a dog, da-da-da. Well, I don't know what just a dog means to you, but I know my dog can understand me. And I know my dog is being a little shit right now, and that's why he's doing this. Because you come to understand people by living with them. You come to read them. You can read people when you spend long enough with them. The problem with a lot of parents, like with my parents, is that sometimes we listen to other people before listening to our own kids, and before listening to what we think is right. And there's some stuff, social pressure of like, people telling you, you should do this, you should do that, you should do that. So a lot of parents is like, why would you listen to anyone? Doesn't matter who it is. Why would you listen to somebody else that thinks they have better understanding about your kid than actually, doing more research on your own about if your kid is dealing with depression, if your kid is having trouble with this, trouble with that. Why don't you do real research from people who's experienced in that area, not just somebody says like, oh, you should just, whoop his ass and he will learn, or something. So yeah, many times I felt alone when if teachers will call my parents and they would tell them like, well, your daughter this, your daughter that. She's always getting, she doesn't get along some of her classmates, or she always seems like she's spaced out, like she's not paying attention, Like there'll be certain things that the teachers would notice, and then that will make my parents, well, my mom very stressed out. They'd be like, why, wow. I guess parents are always like, kind of like with the stigma, like, I don't want to have a trouble kid. Like, I don't want to have a kid that's going to give me trouble. I do feel that there was a lot of that when my parents were getting these, constant calls from teachers and stuff like that. Because they didn't want to be all like my mom many times she will kind of like defend me, because she will notice there will be some teachers that were like way too mean. But then like I do feel that she will have this kind of like contradicting securities, where she feel like, am I just being that mom that is always kind of like, fighting with everyone for my daughter, and maybe it's my daughter who's the problem, maybe I need to fix her, like she had this, stigma. Unfortunately, that time there was not much she could really, she could talk to other people, and other people, everyone would tell her like, oh, you just need to discipline her more. You just need to discipline her more. Like, that's what everybody would say. But it's like, Mom, nobody freaking live with us. How can you listen to people that you think in 2-3 words they're gonna understand what you're really going through, who I really am, what I'm really going through, what's really going on? Like, why would you listen to anyone else? Like, why would you not listen to me? But at the same time, she was brought up by a very strict dad too. My grandpa, who was also, I always say, like, I get my autism from my grandpa, because he was autistic and he had a lot of anger problems. So he would snap. He would just kind of like, he would have mood swings like crazy. And he was a character. He was very funny. He had a lot of really good things. A lot of people loved him, but a lot of people hated him because of his volatile behavior. And he just kind of was like very intense, very hyper, da da da. So my mom saw a lot of her dad in me. So she probably thought, oh, well, I don't want her to be like my grandpa. I need to be more strict on her so she doesn't, become this way. It's very confusing. You know what? I feel like it has to be very confusing when you don't know better. Like, you don't have the information. So having information is so important. So important for parents, so important for anyone. I feel like anything, nowadays there's no excuse. There's Google. Like, there's no excuse anymore. People need to research anything that they doubt, anything that they come across that they might be wondering. They need to research, and they need to research. If they're thinking about one thing, they need to think about, like, okay, let me hear the counterpart. Definitely information is so important to make better decisions. Definitely, I think that would have helped me so much. That would have helped me understand me. My parents are very like the type of humor that we have, especially in that town. It's very dark. It's very satire. It's very satire, because they'll be like, okay, since you're Asperger's, let me explain. That they're very like that. So we're always like, oh, okay, Asperger's. We're always kind of like talking to each other. And then my dad is always like, I've been getting them so, okay, because I never shut up about it. So I have half of them right now. So now it's different, right? So I think back in the day, there would have been, I don't know if I made my point clear, but they were like that. And I feel that there was a time where, so we really split parts when I was a teenager, where I was like, yeah, they just don't get me. And that's how we didn't get each other at all. Like, we could have been completely two different, like, speaking two different languages might as well, because we just didn't get along for a long period of my time. And, one thing that I was going to mention, because my mom would always tell me too, she'll mention, like, why is it I always got called by, this is something she will mention over and over again. Like, it started cutting deep after a while. She'd be like, why is it I always got complaints from your teachers? Why is it you always got me problems? Because my other siblings never did. So I was like, okay, Mom, yeah, like, and I love how you always listen to whatever they said. There was a couple of really sad stories that I gotta mention on my channel too, which will make a lot of sense, and hopefully it can teach some parents to be like, why you should just, your kids, what they are capable of. I mean, unless somebody's accusing them of something bad, Like if somebody's saying like, oh, your kid is trouble, you know, she doesn't do this. And if there's little signs of that, just definitely look into them and see why is it. Maybe it's an early sign of depression. Maybe like even if it's a young kid, like depression can start at any stage, at any age. So maybe it's something else, but definitely always seek a second opinion or do more research, because I feel like if somebody was tell you like, oh well, and it's a huge accusation, like somebody was to say, oh, your kid is literally like, beating up kids in school and hurting them, or breaking stuff, or like balance something like really, then you have to look into that. Wow, like that doesn't sound like my kid. He's never done something like that at home. So you have to really look into like if that is true and what's going on, because I feel like the kind of bullshit that my teachers will tell my parents, and they just kind of like blow things out of proportion, like, oh, why doesn't she get along? Why? It was just kind of like stupid, like really, like they made such a huge deal, and then like it was so horrible to feel that to them I was a liar. So those were one of the things that I harbored in my heart for a long time. It was hard for me to let it go. I finally let it go. I came into terms, now as an adult, came into terms that my parents are just human. I want to believe they did what they thought was best. They're not terrible people. They're not bad people at all, and for the most part, they're great people. They're great people. They just have flaws. They have insecurities like everyone else. They, we all sometimes, tend to, what's it called, have, skepticism, or get, I guess, influenced by what other people say. It happens. It happens. And if I would have been in their place, I would have definitely not acted that way either at all. But that's because I'm a different person. I'm a kind of person that I always question everything. But also maybe because of my own experiences. So you never know. My mom wasn't the type of person that she always got in trouble. My dad did. But my dad was a boy, and he was very machista in that time. So he just thought like, whoa, I'm a boy, but you shouldn't be getting in trouble kind of thing. So it's kind of one of those things where like, you got to understand where your parents are coming from and know that that's the best they can do. And you can love them or hate it for that. That's a personal decision. I choose to forgive them, and I choose to be like, you know what, you did the best you could. And so far, they did a great job. They've been great parents. We finally rescued our relationship, and we do get in fights here and there, but no, it's been so much better now that I've been kind of like explaining them a lot about what autism is, and I've been always talking about that. I have a divided family now. The side that is just kind of like, please shut up. Also, you talk about. Can you not talk about that anymore? Why everything that you have to talk about has to be related to autism? And then the other side that is just kind of like, they're always like, oh yeah, that's so Asperger's. Oh, they're just kind of like always. Oh, but you know what? That's almost the funniest part is that I got my dad thinking that he's Asperger's. My dad is like, I think I'm Asperger's. And he was saying, Francesca, this is a really good movie. You have to see. It's really good. You have to see it. The guy, it's about a guy really smart that he's Asperger's. He's always saying that. Like that's how he thinks he can relate to me in my conversation. He's always like, yeah. And like so and so, yeah, that person so Asperger's. He's always saying that. It's so funny. So yeah, I got all my family on board with the whole, the Asperger's train, the autistic train. But I think most of my family is actually most of my family is neurodivergent. My mom, I don't think she's autistic, but she's definitely ADHD. She's definitely ADHD. That I say that I used to. Remember, I never finished my point. I used to drop the cup all the time from the table, and my mom used to think I did that on purpose. For example, she wouldn't understand. Those little things she wouldn't understand. Like she's doing it on purpose. But yeah, like my mom is ADHD. My other siblings got diagnosed with ADHD too. They're ADHD, and then only one of my siblings is neurodivergent.
So do you feel like typically feel a strong understanding for autistic people who might have like higher support needs than you or might be like non-speaking, and why or why not?
I definitely believe that we um, have still like, although there's a lot of similarities, I still think that we're definitely there's a lot of different subgroups within subgroups in the spectrum. A lot mainly being for because you have to take in consideration personality, you have to take in consideration environment or like upbringing and stuff. You have to take in consideration also culture. Culture has a lot to do with, even though obviously culture, it doesn't necessarily reflect a lot in autistic people because they can be very separated from their own, you know, from their own culture per se. They probably not be exactly like if you're, for example, an Asian person might not be like the majority. They probably not even understand all the Asian culture, but it's still part of their upbringing. It still plays a role in how their personality is going to turn out. Neurotypes by Steve Silver. I have to read it. This is the last part that I was reading was how he brought up, you know, he went back to that, you know, when you meet one person on the spectrum, you meet one person on the spectrum. That thing has so many meanings, and a lot of things go back to that. And that's because um, the fact that, for example, the fact that you can speak and say like, I usually feel like this, I usually feel like that, I get overwhelmed like this, I get overwhelmed by that. I can relate to a lot of things you say because you're expressing them, but also because your ability to understand complex, maybe you want to understand all complex topics, but you can understand complex dialogue, complex conversation. That's what I can still relate to. I cannot relate to a person that doesn't understand complex topics because I can, it's, uh, I can kind of like, for example, I can relate to, for example, to a children's mentality in many ways because I was once a child, but a child's brain is not the same as person with an intellectual disability because their development is different. You know, there's certain areas that they can do better than a child, than a baby, and there's other areas where they're still babies and like they're still at a, I guess you can compare it to like a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old. So there's certain areas where they're still, for example, the girl from Fathering Autism, she's a teenager in many ways. You know, she still has the teenager hormones and the attitude and the, you know, the like the mood swings and stuff like that. But in other ways, she's still like a child, you know. So and in other ways, she's autistic. You know, she's like she has that autistic way where like she's supposed to be in her own room or STEM and stuff like that. So there's all these aspects of a person, all these aspects where like I could probably relate to some of the aspects, but I would only be able to, I think, relate, understand a person that doesn't speak if I live with them. If I live with them, if I observe them, if I see them. That's why I think this girl's parents, like, I understand her, I think, better than anyone else could. Would that be the preferred option that other people would have preferred? Maybe not. But it's like, hey, if you, I don't know if these people have like the perfect parents and that's why they think they can go ahead and correct every other else's parents, or their parenting experience, their parents' experience was so traumatic that they don't want nobody else to go through that, you know, ever. But you can't stop that. There's um it's really, I find it really weird that people just kind of like, they see one video or one exposed image of what's happening in one family somewhere in the world, and right off the bat we think that's the only person that is suffering. It's like there's people out there that are having a lot worse all over the world, and their lives are not being exposed. So you criticizing one family for having a couple of flaws, it's really doing nobody any good, because it's gonna, you know, when you attack, no matter what, when you criticize someone, people don't take criticism very well. So it's always best to, like, for example, what's a tactic that a lot of scammers have, right? They seduce you by using positive things, by using, look at my life, look at what I have, look at this, look at that, wouldn't you like this, wouldn't you like that, you know? So if you attract people by like showing the positives out of something, they never show, but like, you can make $1 million, be so easy. They always talk about all the positive things. They never say about like, oh, but by the way, you're gonna have to do this and you're gonna have to do that. Like, they don't show the negative, they show all the positives. At the end of the day, it's up to you how you're gonna do it. If somebody is a bad parent and they just, because they simply don't care, nothing's gonna change that. Nothing that you say, it's gonna change the fact that if they're really terrible parents, they're still gonna continue to be terrible parents. You know, I feel like what these people are doing, sharing their life, they're obviously, the fact that they're out there, you know, trying these things, and doing all these things, obviously they're doing some type of research, doing some type of, you know, engaging, you know, bigger audience and getting advice from different experts and stuff like that. So it gives other people a different perspective of what it is to have a kid with autism. And I think for the most part, they act pretty positive. Like they seem to be very, very patient, very understanding, compared to what I was telling you about those Martha moms, how they just make it talk about like, oh, poor me, and this tragedy on my family, and you know, it's so hard, and you know, my kid is just like, you know, destroying my family. They just kind of make it sound so hard, like everything is bad because the kid has autism. Everything in that person's life and that person's family life is so bad because the kid has autism. Like that, you know, as long as they're not that, what do you call that? Discrimination, ableism. But it's more than just that. It's belittling someone simply because this is something that is not your cup of tea. You're gonna belittle someone, you know. It's like, what kind of person does that to their own child? We're humans, right? We've all been through moments where like, it's like, oh, I don't like this person, and I'm sure my parents, many times they probably didn't freaking, you know, there was times they didn't talk to me. There was times that we didn't speak for, as an adult, we didn't speak for a few years. Yeah, you go through those moments, you know, where you're like, that's it, I'm done. You know, I don't love my kids anymore, or whatever. I don't love my parents anymore. So I do want to think that maybe there has to be moments where our parents would be like, you know, why God punished me with, you know, this kid? Like, why is he this difficult? Because there is autistic kids, I heard, they're so difficult. They just, like, their ability to control our emotions are just, you know, too volatile, and they're out of control, and that can be very overwhelming for a person. Like me, myself, I think I'm afraid of being a parent because I'm scared of not being able to know what to do in difficult situations. So imagine an extremely difficult situation. You know, not everybody can control. Not everybody has that patience, that ability to think straight, to be the bigger person. Not everyone has that ability. So yeah, a lot of parents have to go through these like frustrations, and I guess they seek for these, you know, Facebook groups for like some support. But some of them they do take it to the next board. We're like, oh, you know, they attack other communities. They attack other communities, like the communities that think that defend the rights of the autistic. They're like, oh, I'm so tired of these neurodivergents and and you know, they don't want to, you know, they're against the cure, and you know, we should cure, blah blah blah. Like, there's nothing wrong with looking for a cure. And, you know, they get really intense. And I guess it's their frustration. It's really their frustration. Who knows? Maybe the autistic kid doesn't know what she's really writing online, and chances are the person will never find out, because people that find things online that somebody wrote years ago, it's really, really hard. So, but maybe they are acting that way. So all we can do is, you know, preach with the example. This is kind of like it's not like one of those things where you fight for women's rights, or you fight for, you know, certain things, because this is a very personal territory. I think that autistics with high support are always going to need high support and care. It's people caring for them. So they technically can't speak for themselves because they can make their own decisions, because whoever's taking care of them has to be part of that decision. Just kind of like when you're married, it's not like you can just make your own decisions. You gotta discuss that with your husband as part of that decision. So that's how it is. You know, those who don't like that, who don't appreciate it, they can take over. You want to take over and take care of this person instead. If you think your plan is better, then come over and take care of this person then, you know. A lot of parents don't like, for example, they're upset because they're scared of their kids going to institutions. That's another one. As much as some people can say, oh, some institutions are wonderful and and they've been getting so much better, to some people that it doesn't seem that way. They're like, no, I'd rather my kid having an independent life. I'd rather my kid being here at home and knowing that I know that he's going to be with someone that's going to take care of them than being in an institution forever. So maybe there's going to be better institutions out there. They should really promote themselves that way. You know, show them, prove like, hey, people who live in this institution are so happy. You know, kids are so happy. They're always playing. They hire nothing but the most kindest people. But that's hard, man. I think it's really hard to find. It's hard to find good employees as it is. Imagine good employees that are actually going to really understand and care for autistics. I mean, I met a lot of people that work for autistics, and they always seem to be very kind people for some reason. So I don't know, but everybody has their ideas. So at the end of the day, you can only prove them with the example. I think that's the only way. Be like, no, look at this video, or look at this documentary, how these people live so much happier. They have to see it, they have to visualize, because most people's idea of an institution is like you know, something similar to a jail, pretty much. And yeah, so I definitely don't think that I can understand all their needs. I think everybody's different. Everybody's different. Even the ones that are like Amanda Bags, she was non-speaking, but she could still communicate with the computer. She could have probably be independent enough to have her own job, to be like a computer person, and just, you know, communicate through computer, everything, which is the new type of jobs nowadays. But at the same time, do I say that I can relate to a lot of things that she says? And I feel like that her message was very important. I feel like a lot of people should, you know, I think it changed my perspective and a lot of things. So anyway, I feel like it gave me that, not that it, like I kind of like always had this idea, but I didn't know how to show it to other people, feel other people see how, you know, how she was able to do all these things, how she communicated, and how all this theming that she did, and her interaction with the world is very profound, what she says. I feel like if other people see that, they're going to understand, be like, okay, so that's autism. That's what it is. One point that she makes is that you don't have to communicate through words. It's not that, you know, what I do is not my way of communicating. It's because I'm doing this. Just because I'm doing this or touching that doesn't mean that I'm trying to send you signs or trying to do anything. Simply that's something that I feel like doing. It's my interaction with my environment. Not everything that I do has to be a way of communicating. I communicate differently. I communicate with my environment. I understand what neurodivergence. I understand what other people say. I understand what other people, you know, say or do and everything. The problem is that they don't understand me. You know, they don't speak my language. She says that it's really, really deep, really like whoa. So I want to make a video on that, because it's really, really interesting. And I also want to make one in Spanish, so like other people in Spanish can really be like mind blown, like whoa, you know. But still, like me saying that I can understand every autistic person out there, it's like me saying I can understand every woman out there. You know, I don't. Women might relate in a lot of ways. That we have like the similar hormones, and we get our period, and we have like all these, you know, similar things that we have as women. But at the same time, we have different beliefs. We have different mentalities. We're at different levels. So for example, even people with ADHD, I can't say I can speak for every ADHDer out there, because a lot of them think so different from me, and they want to they want to cure or fix their ADHD by taking Adderall, which is so bad for you. You know, taking Adderall, taking all these antidepressant, anti-anxiety medication. And it's just like, dude, you just need to, you have a treasure. You have a treasure you just need to exploit. You know, like you need to learn how to work with your ADHD, not block it. So yeah, I can't say I can relate to everyone in the spectrum, especially those with intellectual disabilities, because I never felt like I had an intellectual disability. So I feel that all of my struggles with focusing and stimming and all that stuff, I have a different perspective to them because I intellectualize them differently. When you have a disability, I think they intellectualize them in a different way, or maybe they don't even think about it. Like when I was little, like I wouldn't think about it, you know, I wouldn't see it that way. So obviously I can try to relate to a certain extent, but I don't think I can 100% relate, because I feel like the best way to get to know a person is to live with that person. To live with a person, or spend a lot of time with a person. That's the best way you can get to know anyone. It doesn't matter what they are. It's just obviously having the open-minded of knowing about this. Not the fact because there's neurotypicals that can understand neurodivergence very, very well, but because they study it and they spend a lot of time with these people, so they're able to really, really grasp what it is. I don't know if they fully get it. I still don't know, because many times I ask my boyfriend, like I feel like he really gets me. He gets it. Like he could be like, oh yeah, this person isn't, is autistic or something like that. So I feel like it's a very common ground. I feel like he doesn't have to. My suspicion is that you don't have to be autistic to get an autistic, but you do have to spend a lot of time with the person to get them.
How do you feel in general about the whole dynamic of parents in the autism world? And do you think that it's accurate for parents of non-speaking autistics to say that they are their voice?
Like I said before, everybody's different. They all have different beliefs about what autism is. One of the major problems, like I mentioned before, is that most people don't have, there hasn't been enough awareness about it, and most people have, still to this day, huge misconceptions about it. And the people who are becoming very optimistic about the whole topic are making it, or they call themselves advocates or whatever. They're making it, I feel like, more confusing, and they're making this niche more close to kind of like support amongst each other versus sharing it with, making the whole world understand. Like they're not making it engaging for anyone out there. And my purpose is the contrary, to make it like for the neurotypicals can understand. And when it comes to parents of autistic children, well, they're all different. Some of them are parents that don't understand autism at all. And well, all parents are, I can't say that all of them are bad parents, because everybody has different style of parenting, and some parents are very patient, understanding, and some other parents are strict or just not very understanding. And then on top of that, you throw in the mix the fact that they haven't had any or been given all the wrong information. So all that makes them take that's their idea about autism. So a lot of them get frustrated. A lot of them take it against the children. A lot of them get depressed, and they show that on their children and stuff like that. And or a lot of them seek for help in all the wrong places. They become vulnerable. They become victims of a lot of these people selling the pseudoscience, pseudoscience treatment and all that stuff. So there's an infinitive amount of possibilities when it comes to predators out there taking advantage of vulnerable, desperate people. So definitely the answer to everything is research and learn, and those who want to be advocates, advocate. Teach and spread awareness. Don't go around lecturing people or teaching people what they're, or telling people what to do or not to do. Just spread awareness. That's all you can really do. I think that's the best way. A lot of parents, even without a lot of awareness, they're still good. They're still genuinely good, caring people. So there's all kinds. There's really all kinds. Some people really can feel like some people really can understand their children and be their child's voice, and some other ones really don't. And that's, I think, in all cases, even for people who speak. Like, I always felt for many years my parents didn't understand me at all. Like I mentioned earlier, I heard of cases of people of non-speaking autistics who have very, very caring parents. Well, actually, one time I met this, but I never asked her more because I didn't want to ask too much. But I saw there was the cutest kid. It was probably like 8 years old or something. When I used to work at Marshall's, and I just hear this kid going on like, it was just like kind of like making the coolest like accent or something, and just kind of like talking to, I think, to himself or something, and like he was playing like a game. And then I was like, and then I see the mom calling him, or like some white lady. So this kid looked kind of like Middle Eastern. He had really big eyes. I assumed that because he was sound like what he was speaking was Middle Eastern, and so I see him, I'm calling his name, and somehow I saw she was looking for the kid. I'm like, oh, that's your kid. She was like, yeah, that's my kid. I'm like, oh, what language does he speak, you know? And then she was all like, oh, actually, that's just gibberish. He's autistic, you know? He makes up his own language. And it was really cute. And the kid was just all like, no. He just looked like such a happy kid. I didn't ask her, like, does he speak anything else, but besides gibberish? I think that's one of the kids that he will be able to develop language eventually. He just kind of like was really, really into just kind of like just daydreaming and just kind of seemed like a very happy kid. So that's kind of like one of the things that I would have. I don't know. I never seen anybody else expose a case like that. He seemed like a normal kid. Like, he didn't seem to have motor skills or tics or anything. He just seemed like oh, in La La Land, and that's about it. So, see, that was kind of like very. That's why, and that time I didn't know much about autism. It was very confusing to me because I'm like, okay, I see the autistic ladies that come in clean here, and they can't even do things without having strict orders. And then you see this kid who just seems so happy and full of life and just kind of like playful, except that he speaks a language that he made up his own. So that was just like really, really interesting, So it's just, there's all kinds of cases. And then also in the book, New York Tribes talks about even the scientists saying, if you study 100 different people with autism, you can get 100 different genetic reasons like why they become. So it's also like a mix, like the brain, it's a mixture of just how like the color, of the skin, how the race, you can make mix of humans. I feel like the brain is also can be a mix of, that's why some people don't, some people can mask better being autistic. They can act more like neurotypical, but that's because, because of the mix of the two. So I do believe that could definitely be true. I mean, why not? It happens with everything. Why would it not happen with the brain, But yeah, so it's a lot has to do with genetics. A lot has to do with environmental, has to do with everything. So there's some kids that don't develop language until later, but then they act like normal kids. Like they after that they learn and speak and like everything else, so this is one of those things where like and the mom seemed very sweet. That's one of the things I was gonna say. She seemed very sweet and very understanding and like very just kind of like her like what I can say my take out of it looked like oh, my kid is autistic, cool. It just kind of like she kind of had that out that's kind of how she presented her kid. So, that there's all kinds of parents. So you can't, not one thing is going to mark another one. I think it's just on the individual. But definitely having the better understanding about things, I think the more knowledge you have about something, the better. So definitely knowledge.
So what are your thoughts on kind of that conversation of, who gets to speak for non-speaking autistics when it's like the whole like advocates versus parents versus etc. Like, what are your thoughts on that whole conversation?
Depends on what area we are strong about, we're focused on. If an advocate has connections with other organizations where they can say like, hey, you know what? I noticed that this organization is not really providing the right money for the right causes to increase more support or more money to go to, to I don't know, what do they usually use money for? Let's say, I don't know, let's say develop better institutions or something. Whatever they use they use the money for, or creating more or expanding more information, or whatever it is, that they use the money for. They can definitely advocate for that. Be like, hey, I feel like this would be, this is something that, based on my studies and my area of expertise, I think that autistic people need more this. Autistic people need more that. Something that would, kind of like a common ground for, accommodations and support. But from there, in regards to, like, let's say I'm a parent and I have a kid with autism, it's kind of like I'm the lawyer for the kid. I'm speaking for him because for some reason my family is my immediate blood. I brought him to this world. I raised him. So even if I'm wrong, my belief is that I know what's better for my kid. So no one in this world can tell me that they know my kid better than me. No one. Maybe I don't even know my kid, myself. But if I don't know him very well, nobody else is going to know him better than me. So that's one thing that all they have to do is give me the benefit of the doubt. If I could be like, hey, my kid needs this, or I would like this for my kid, or I would like my kid to do this and advice and pointing a person to the right direction, I think is the best thing they can do. Let's say in regards to like, oh, my kid has trouble with this, or my kid has trouble with that, or I know he's really struggling with this, or he doesn't sleep, or he doesn't, is had really bad, what's it called, digestive issues, So I feel like these advocates should be there to be a guide. My fiance listens to a lot of podcasts, and a lot of very, successful people that give like great advice about how they made it from the bottom to the top and everything. And something very, very smart that stuck with me since I heard it very recently, was that, and you can only be, you can either be the victim in the story, the hero, or the guide, but if, for example, if you feel like you're the hero in a story and you want to come and I feel like I'm the hero of my story, right? And you want to come and tell me what to do in my story, like, I'm not going to listen to you, because I'm going to be like, oh, you're a hero. Okay, you're hearing your story, but I'm the hero of my story. So I need to look for a guide, like, thank you, but you're not, you're not what I need, because you're not here to save me. Like, I'm a hero, like we're in the same character here. So if you're an advocate, you need to be a guide. You can't go and tell people, try to rescue them, because everybody's a hero. Everybody's a hero in their own story, unless I feel like I'm the victim, then you can come and rescue me. But usually if I'm the victim, people like scammers or pseudoscience, frauds are going to come and pretend they're the heroes to be like, here, I got the solution. I'm here to save you. And that's why a lot of victims fall, they're vulnerable and they fall for these predators. So the best thing you can do this is mainly for like, who's giving it for like a sales technique and stuff like that, is be a guide, is telling, like, guiding people into like what's the solution so they can take action. If they're the hero, they're gonna take action. You're the guide, you're gonna guide them to what's the solution so they can take action. So that made a lot of sense to me in many, many ways. I thought I could apply it here. But pretty much, if a parent needs help, if a parent, if a parent feels like he's the hero and his child is a victim and he wants to help his victim, he needs a guide so he can, take action to find, in a situation that they're in, to rescue, to find the solution and stuff. So the guide is the one that points people in the right direction. But you always have to come across as a guide. You can go ahead and try to attack people and be like, you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that, because people are not going to listen to you like that. And I feel like that's how it is with parents with kids with autism. When we have problems, we're all we're looking for solutions to our problems. That's the main thing. So as an advocate, you can speak up for the general needs of if you think like, hey, you know what? I feel like all of us, we're lacking this. We're lacking, this type of thing in the classroom. We're lacking, this and that. We shouldn't have this. It's your responsibility to, target the better good of everyone. Kind of find like, okay, most autistics or all autistics will love if this accommodation was available. If this accommodation was available, and that's what they should focus on. So I feel like they can speak for autistics in that way, like offering solutions, and that's it. But I feel like there's a lot of attacks. There's a lot of negative information and confusing information being shown on social media, and I don't feel like that's advocacy at all. I feel like that's just the judgment, pretty much, and that doesn't do nothing to anyone. And nobody likes being judged. And nobody's perfect either, so we shouldn't be judging anyone.
Is there anything else that you wanted to bring up or comment on in our thing today?
No, I think I pretty much over-explained already. I wanted to give some background so people see how what I meant by, because how I mentioned, like, a lot of things can be taken, a lot of phrases can be taken and interpreted in so many different ways. It's very important to know the specifics.